Mr. President, distinguished members of the Court, this is both an honor and a responsibility of monumental proportions to appear before you today on behalf of the Republic of South Africa for the second time within 41 days. Mr. President, while South Africa's foreign policy has always favored a two-state solution, the prevailing conditions suggest that unless such an approach deals with the inequitable offering of land to Palestinians, the dismantling of all the illegal settlements, the right of return to all Palestinian refugees, such a solution may solidly lead to the disenfranchisement of the indigenous people of Palestine and concretize the prevailing injustices brought about by decades of apartheid settler colonialism. A just solution for all who legally qualify to live in historical Palestine would need to be negotiated with the assistance of the international community. The inordinate delay in achieving a fair and just settlement has resulted in an unending cycle of violence. A clear legal characterization of the nature of Israel's regime over the Palestinian people can only assist in remedying the ongoing delay in achieving a just settlement. In this regard, on the legal questions placed before the courts by the United Nations General Assembly in Resolution 77/247 of 30 December 2022, we wish to make the following submissions. South Africa cannot overstate the significance of this advisory opinion for the Palestinian people, more especially the legal characterization of the situation of occupation and the imposition of the system of racial oppression and apartheid, which have unconscionably been permitted to continue for far too long. The occupation alone has persisted for 56 years. As the UN Special Rapporteur on the occupied Palestinian territories explained in 2022, the occupation by Israel has been conducted in profound defiance of international law and hundreds of United Nations resolutions, with scant pushback from the international community. Consequently, Mr. President, that defiance by Israel has already led to the killing of tens of thousands of Palestinians, including an estimated 30,000 killed in the past 4 months alone. These are not mere statistics, Mr. President. They are flesh and blood of the Palestinian people. Therefore, we must ask, when will Israel's decades-long impunity for widespread and systematic human rights violations and violations of peremptory norms of international law end, if not now? Over the past 136 days, the world has watched in horror daily the relentless attacks on Gaza, the ferocity and violence of Israel's latest military campaign against Gaza, and its flouting of international law, including an order of this court, which was handed down on 26 January 2024, is the clearest indication that Israel considers itself unrestrained in its actions against Palestinians. Its actions recur with even more depravity and bloodshed, being of such a serious nature as to lead this court to find them plausibly genocidal. I remind the court that it is in our recent submissions before it, in the hearings for the indication of provisional measures in the application of the Convention and Prevention of and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide in the Gaza Strip in South Africa versus Israel, South Africa underscored how Israel's ongoing acts and omissions in Gaza form part of a continuum of illegal acts perpetrated by it against Palestinian people since the 1948 Nakba. Since then, the 1967 occupation. The legality of that occupation is now the subject of this matter before the court. Mr. President, The Palestinian cause is one which resonates strongly with the people of South Africa. That is because the Palestinian struggle invokes mournful memories of our own struggle against apartheid, segregation and oppression. Ours is an experience aptly referred to by the United Nations Security Council in 1980 as a crime against the conscience and dignity of mankind, and as being incompatible with the rights and dignity of man. It is not without a measure of irony that one notes that this painful experience of our past has enabled South Africa to make a significant contribution to the development of international law on apartheid. From this experience, a universal legal prohibition of its practice emerged in the form of a peremptory norm and an international crime. The norm against apartheid has become one of the most cited norms of jus cogens. We as South Africans sense, see, hear and feel to our core the inhumane discriminatory policies and practices of the Israeli regime as an even more extreme form of the apartheid that was institutionalized against black people in my country, coincidentally from the year 1948, and which lasted until 1994. The late South African cleric, the Most Reverend Archbishop Desmond Tutu, wrote the following, open quote, "Many black South Africans have traveled to the occupied West Bank and have been appalled by Israeli roads built for Jewish settlers that West Bank Palestinians are denied access to, and by Jewish-only colonies built on Palestinian land in violation of international law. Black South Africans and others around the world have seen the 2010 Human Rights Watch report, which describes the two-tier system of laws, rules and services that Israel operates for the two populations in areas in the West Bank under its exclusive control, which provide preferential services, development and benefits for Jewish settlers while imposing harsh conditions on Palestinians. This, in my book, is apartheid. It is untenable." End quote. That was the position already 14 years ago, since 2010. Since then, the situation of the occupied Palestinian population has worsened exponentially, with the reality of apartheid becoming so obviously explicit as to now being recognized not only by South African and Palestinian victims of apartheid themselves, but by the broader international community, including both Israeli and international human rights organizations. Moreover, it is clear that Israel's illegal occupation is also being administered in breach of the prohibition of the crime of apartheid. It is indistinguishable from settler colonialism, which has no place in the 21st century. Israeli apartheid must end. Palestine, the last unfulfilled sacred trust of civilization, for whom the international community bears responsibility, must now be fulfilled. The Palestinian people must be permitted to exercise their inalienable right to self-determination. Mr. President, South Africa bears a special obligation both to its own people and the international community to ensure that wherever the egregious and offensive practices of apartheid occur, these must be called out for what they are and brought to an immediate end, and that the perpetrators of such egregious breaches of peremptory norms of international law be held accountable. In the construction of wall case, this court held that the construction of the wall being built by Israel, the occupying power, in the occupied Palestinian territory, including in and around East Jerusalem, and its associated regime, are contrary to international law, and that Israel is under an obligation to dismantle forthwith the structure therein situated, and to repeal or render ineffective forthwith all legislative and regulatory acts relating thereto. Despite that 19-year-old finding by the court, today Palestinians in the West Bank, including many in East Jerusalem, continue to be contained behind a segregating wall. They continue to be subjected to discriminatory land zoning and planning policies, punitive and administrative house demolitions, and violent Israeli army incursions into their villages, towns and cities, and refugee camps, including Area A, which is supposed to be under full Palestinian control. Palestinians continue to be subjected to routine violent Israeli raids on their homes, with thousands of adults and children being subjected to unlawful arbitrary arrests by Israeli soldiers in the dead of night, and indefinitely renewable internment without trial, known as euphemistically as administrative detention, and a dual legal system pursuant to which Palestinians, including Palestinian children, are tried under military legislation by military judges, often themselves illegal settlers, in Israeli military courts, without basic protection of international humanitarian and human rights law, while Israeli settlers living illegally in the same territory are subject to an entirely different legal regime and tried in Israeli civilian courts with full access to due process. Separately, Palestinians in Gaza have lived in a sealed-off enclave, fragmented and segregated from the West Bank, and subjected by Israel to regression, sustained closure, and seized. Palestinian refugees and exiles in the diaspora are systematically denied their right to return to their homes. Apartheid Israel discriminates against and fragments all Palestinian people to ensure the maintenance of Israeli Jewish domination. South Africa beseeches this court to examine the institutionalized regime of discriminatory laws, policies and practices applied by Israel along the definition of the crime of apartheid, and to find that Israel subjects Palestinians to what constitutes an apartheid regime. The clear legal characterization of the nature of Israel's regime over the Palestinian people can only assist in remedying the ongoing delay in achieving a just settlement, a delay which perpetually conflagrates the cycle of violence. As I speak, and for each of the past 136 days, the world is witnessing in Gaza an assault that is unprecedented in speed and severity, violating the most basic precepts of the right to life and the survival of a population. The international community's unwillingness to hold Israel accountable for its policies and practices, and its failure to ensure the immediate, unconditional and total withdrawal of Israeli troops and an immediate end to Israel occupation and apartheid in Palestine, including Gaza, the West Bank and East Jerusalem, emboldens Israel to cross a further threshold, namely to commit the crime of crimes, genocide. Mr. President, distinguished members of the court, it is now my honor to request you to invite Advocate Andrew Stemmet to the bar to submit South Africa's further observations on the questions referred to the court by the UN General Assembly.